YouTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie. And it is July 1st as I'm filming this. So we're no longer in the 6th month. But I thought I would go ahead and film my favorites of the first half of the year. And so here we go. So I'm doing these in order by the month I've read them. Now, some of them I admit that some of them, even though they're on this list and they were my favorites in the moment, I did decide at least a couple of them are in the donation pile. And to me, that doesn't always mean that it just means that I'm like, I read it and I absolutely loved it, but I don't need to read it again. So I guess there's two kinds of favorites for me. They're the favorites that I will keep forever. And then there's the favorites that they're favorites in the moment, but I'm probably not going to I don't know if I'll read them again. And that's most likely their content is just like, and that they're, they're kind of heavy in content a little bit. Okay, so first we have, which now in this case, this book that I'm first going to talk about is heavy in content, but I'm keeping it because, it's one that I want to have a whole shelf of this kind of literature, or this literature that comes from this country. So the first one I want to talk about is, where's it? I put them in first we have Lola's House, Filipino Women Living with War. This is a nonfiction book. So during World War II, the Japanese, like the Germans, or not the Germans specifically, but the Nazi Party of Germany, wanted to take over and create an empire. So the Japanese wanted to create their own empire in Asia. So at the time, and they would take women from these Asian countries, keep them somewhere, and have a little too much fun with them, exploit them in a physical way. And so the author of this book, Evelina Galang, she and a group of young students, went to the Philippines and found this group of these women who were living in they had their own kind of home, like a group home, I think. And they got to know them and form a bond with them, a friendship and a bond of trust with these women, and had decided to create a documentary about their experiences. And they gained their trust and wanted to tell their stories because they were forced to keep silent because either people wouldn't believe them or didn't want to hear it after, we won the war and everything. And dealing with all their hardships that they went through, how they survived, and, told we got these women's stories. And this is just such a heartbreaking read. And just a tough emotional read, and it might make you cry, and and you get all these pictures to go with them. They're women, and there are some moments of happiness in the book, like moments of fun. Like Galang, she at the time was unmarried, and they were giving her a hard time they were teasing her about that. They would tease her about that and wanting to get her husband. They had teased her about, how, there would be times when they show them dance. She would talk about how they would dance and talking about food. And these Lolas, these grandmothers, wanted to take care of her and make sure she got enough to eat. And they were some of them still maintained their feistiness, their strength, their inner strength. Like they used their experiences, they became strong again and confident. not all of them, and some of them couldn't even talk about. Like one woman had to tell her story via a quilt. But yeah, it is a tough read, but I definitely think people should read it if you're ready to read more about World War II and some of the horrible things that happened to people during that time. But yeah, Lola's House, this book is really so good. So that was not the first book I read, but the first Filipino literature book I read. I mean, I guess it's technically not literature because literature is fiction, but it's like, I don't know if you consider nonfiction literature or not. Like, but anyway. So then, so the next book I'm gonna talk about, let me get it, is the first book in a series. We have The Grace of Kings. And again, this is another really great series. I had a good time reading this. I know it is the writing style is a little different. It reads like you're getting to being told a legend, a folk tale. It's kind of about like rebellion, and how rebellion is a lot messier than we think. Like, we romanticize the idea of rebellion, and it's not always. It can be messy, and just because you're being oppressed, and sometimes the oppressed people, they end up repeating the same mistakes of the original tyrant, and it's kind of explores that idea. It also explores how, like, maybe in the moment while you're fighting the evil empire, you might agree and team up and be partners and be allies, be even friends. But then if you have completely opposing methods and ideas, once you defeat your common enemy, you could potentially become enemies yourself if you can't learn to compromise and see the value in each other's perspectives and learn to find a way to work together. And the relationship between the two main characters, Kuni and Mata, was very complicated and beautiful at the same time, because it's, you can tell there's love and affection between them in the beginning, that they really respect each other, but then as time goes on, their clashing views and belief systems really come between them. And that, to me, is the love story, and the love story at the core of this fantasy novel. The relationship between these two gentlemen. But I also love, Kuni's relationship with particularly Gia. They have a really strong bond. They really get each other, and that is a really beautiful relationship too. Although that one is on shaky ground at times throughout the story. This is such a really intriguing world, and I definitely agree we need more Asian fantasy, which I think we're starting to do better at that, writing more non-Western fantasies. I definitely want to see more of that, and this is a great start to that for me to explore. Like, this kingdom is really, really seems very, really cool, and I did start reading the book 2, which book 2 we are with different characters, and I think it's a different. I think it kind of. The writing kind of slows down, and we're with these characters more. Like, there's not as much of a separation from the reader and the characters. I think the second book. I mean, from what I remember, what I've read so far. But anyway, this is so cool. I really like these characters, and like I said, the world is really great. And I think this was a good start. Yes, the writing style isn't for everybody, but I really enjoyed it. I had a good time with this, and I'm going to get back to book 2 soon. So yeah, the Grace of Kings. And the last book I want to talk about of favorites of January this is one of the ones that I'm gonna, even though I enjoyed it, I don't need to read it again, but it is a favorite. I'm glad I was so happy to have read it. Was Valley of the Dolls by Jacqueline Susann, and this is one of those classic books, modern classics that people talk about, and it made a name for itself, it made an impression. So this one story deals a lot with the foibles of Hollywood, particularly in the 60s and before the 90s, in the 60s through like the 70s or 80s, I think. And it's a very tough, heartbreaking read to see the struggle of these women who try to make it big in Hollywood. Now, one of them, she doesn't want to be an actress or anything, but she does want to be kind of part of this scene and do the business side of Hollywood. And also the pressures that are put on women, the expectations are put on women to look young and beautiful and thin, and how if they're not, and to get married and have babies, and that's the life you should live. Like with the two of the girls, because the pressures of looking always beautiful and maintaining your looks, and that's the only way you'll be center of attention all the time, to always look amazing and always have that something special about you. And we really explored that, and how these women are so desperate, and like one of them becomes very mean and cantankerous and bullies other people, and those two women both resort to this little pill that helps their weight, helps them stay thin and beautiful and young. And the pressures, like I said, the pressures on them to have a certain look, and to be a certain way, and to stay, and the struggle to stay relevant. Meanwhile, you have our other main character, who's the first person we meet. She's this girl from a small town who just hates that life, does not want to be stuck in a small town, wants to have an adventure, live her life before she settles down and get married, but she keeps getting pressured to get married. All the guys that she meets are like, oh, you should be a good little girl and get married. That's important. Like, this is your life. This is what you're meant to do. And like, all these men think they know what's best for her and what she's meant to be. She's meant to be a housewife, and she should get married, because why would you want to live the Hollywood life? And in a way, they're not entirely wrong in that sense, that the Hollywood life can be very ugly and hard on you and just could destroy you. But they're also taking her right to choose, because they're forcing her to make the decision that they want her to make. But she's fighting it. She's like, no, this is what I want with my life. And I think it's one of the great early feminist works, novels exploring feminism, the struggles of women, and the hardships that they face. And it's an older one, it's a very dated one, and it's a long book. Like, there are times when it does seem repetitive, but my theory about that is that it's the author, Jacqueline Susann, pointing out how, like, you will probably repeat the same mistakes and will struggle to get out of that vicious cycle. Every time you think you get yourself out, all of a sudden you get pulled back in of your own free will, or like someone else forces you back into that horrible cycle. And so, yeah, I think she almost did that on purpose, made it long, continued, because she really wanted us to get to know these women and become friends with them, or at least, be intrigued by them and want to know what's going to happen with their life. And I definitely wanted to keep reading, because I wanted to know if they were going to get out of their situation, what crazy shit was going to happen to them next, what mess were they going to get into, how are they going to get out of the situations that they're in. And it was such a page turner for me, at least, and I loved it. And it is older book. It was originally published in the 60s, but still, like, it's one of the early works of feminist fiction, and I definitely don't totally dismiss it yet. And I personally don't think. I think it still explores the same themes. It just, like, themes that are not entirely outdated. I think the themes that it has are not entirely outdated. Not yet, sadly. And Hollywood hasn't changed that much. There's still pressure on women. There's still these expectations, and women, and it's just sometimes there's a different kind of drugs and different ways to, in different methods to expose women and expose people. And now we have the internet, we have social media, so it's even worse because the public will call you out if you screw up in a big way, especially in a big way. So they have more ways to exploit people and to punish people, and it's like you can't get away with anything. These people in Hollywood cannot get away with anything because people will find out. And so I think this is a good, it still is relevant, I think. Yes, it's outdated in a lot of ways, but I don't think it's entirely outdated. And I think there's still relevancy in this book. Okay, so that was January. So February, I finally read Homecoming. I finally bought it, and I finally read it. Homecoming by Kate Morton. This is her newest book, and yes, I still haven't read any of her other books yet, but I will at some point. I keep saying that, but maybe I'm jinxing myself. So this one, it does a lot of similar things to what her other books explore, themes that her other books, which there is how the past can haunt you and affect your present, the relationships between mothers and grandmothers and granddaughters and daughters, and how complicated that is, and how how the past it doesn't just influence your present situation, but it can also influence how you see people and how you treat others. Like it can alter your perspective on how you see someone, and it basically does a lot of what a lot of books do, where you have a present day character who thinks one way, but then she is enlightened, because it's always a female main character. She's enlightened by the past. She realizes things are not what they seem, and there's things that they didn't understand and they didn't know. Particularly when it gets personal, because like half her stories are personally connected to the reader, but then some of her stories, connected to the main character, not me, but connected to the main character. And then some of her stories is the main character that she's not connected to the past events, but it kind of helps her with her present day a little bit. And her stories are very emotional journeys for the characters. And the past storyline is often very sad, and this one was sad, like how things happened, and it was. And now the twist later on was a nice surprise. That one was a surprise. The twist that the story takes. But yeah, it was such a emotional journey between mothers and daughters. And just it's also very tragic, like very very tragic story. And I just there's just something about her stories, even if they explore very similar to each other, and maybe it helps that I kind of space them out and don't read them all at once, like one after the other, because they all haven't come out. She's still writing there, she's still coming out with books, but sometimes how if an author always writes the same kind of story, or like writes a story where it's just characters getting into one shenanigan after another in each consecutive novel, sometimes it can get repetitive and boring. Like that's kind of what happened with Bernard Cornwell's series, that one series that I cannot remember what that series is called, with the character of Uhtred and everything. Like it was all like one adventure right after the other, and I don't think I spaced them out enough. But her books, even though they're not exactly the same plot every time, they do explore a lot of the same themes in each of her books. Which I guess that's themes that she can relate to, in relationship with mothers and daughters, and the importance and how the secrets of the past can haunt you, and you can't sweep things under the rug forever, and it's gonna always come back. And it's just like, it's such a really good explanation of identity and who you are as a person, and is like, I don't know, it's just hard to really talk about her books because they're so good, and it's just something about her books, because there's magic, there's a lot of like very much a lot of emotion, and it's just they're really good. That's all I gotta say. And this was really good. I feel bad because I feel like I should say something more specific, but I don't have any specific to say. I just really love this. Okay, so after that, then next I want to talk about The Dead Zone by Stephen King. So this was really interesting. It explored the idea of knowing something before it happens and deciding should you get involved or not. And what happens when you know something about someone, like you see something, and then you're like, the idea of, do I tell this person or not? Like, you have a main character who, whenever he touches an object, he sees visions. So he kind of sees a possible future in the past and everything of the object he touches. And it's a heavy burden to carry, because if he tells them, they'll think he's crazy, or they'll feel threatened and scared, and they'll want to know more. So he's a character that either is, they're scared of him, or they use him, they exploit him. And Johnny's such a good guy. He's such a decent guy. He's not a saint, but he's a good guy. And he just wants to live his life. He doesn't care about the fame, and he wishes he could go back to the way when things were. He was a teacher, but then, with this power, he cannot go back to being a teacher. Like, he tries to be a tutor at one point, and, what happens to him, just, it kind of breaks your heart a little bit. Our bad guy is a politician, so it's the fear of, like, so it really explores people's fears of people with politicians, the power they hold, and what they could do with that power, and just what if they become too powerful. It like really looks at that idea, and he's the antagonist is an extreme version, a more negative side to his, what side he's on, what political side he's on, the side, and because he becomes very dangerous, and he's also very self-righteous. He believes he's doing right. Those are the best bad guys, the ones who really believe they're in the right, that they're the good guy, that they're doing what's best. And it's even more disturbing because he was a Bible salesman in the beginning of the book before he became a politician. And the beginning of the book there was a part in the beginning of the book that was really hard. It has to do with a dog. Just to warn you, there's a part with a dog that is just really hard to read. And definitely, if you hurt a dog, then if you purposely hurt a dog, because I'm not, then yeah, I'm being a little pissed. And I'm not gonna like you. But it's just like, so I mean that makes a lot of people hate you, even if you accidentally hurt a dog, because there are, because of your lack of consideration, because you're being dumb. But yeah, that part was hard to read. I really liked Johnny's dad. Johnny's our main character. His dad was really cool, and I like how he was very supportive of his son. Didn't want to use him or exploit his son. He just really cared about him, wanted to give him a normal life, like give him some place to come home to. Because where the son was, And then also King, there's another book where King includes a religious character that's a little too enthusiastic. But I think she was and that was Johnny's mother. But she was she wasn't as bad. Like, she was very much, telling Johnny, oh, God has given you a gift. God has blessed you. You have a destiny. God brought you back for a reason. And so it kind of explores a little bit of that with her character, but she's not crazy like Carrie's mom. And Carrie, the mom in that one, was just batshit crazy. And was just a very controlling person. Like, although there was a little manipulation on his mom's part. Like, she does kind of manipulate his dad. Like, she does the, woe is me. I know you think I'm crazy. She does kind of try and manipulate a little bit. But she's not as bad as some other moms, I think. Other characters that are like that. Like, there are worse characters, I think, than her. I liked Johnny's ex-girlfriend. She was very sweet, understandable, and relatable, I think. And you kind of can't blame her for moving on and not wanting to wait. Like, because it's not that she didn't love Johnny anymore. It's just, she didn't know if he would ever wake up. And you kind of felt bad for her, in a way. So, but this was really good. I enjoyed this. I'm glad I read it. And the adaptation was really good. I watched that. I watched it and I enjoyed it. Okay, and then the last book for February was not the last book, but the last book in this one that I consider a favorite was Player Piano by Kurt Vonnegut. This is my first Kurt Vonnegut. And this was, first of all, I think what really helped why I really enjoyed this one is because it was one that I stumbled on my own. I picked it on my own because there is a sense of when I've read books like 1984 and Fahrenheit 451, or there's a little sense of someone convinced me to read, persuaded me to read, or I had to read it for school. And it's just, it takes away some of the sense of discovery for me when I'm picking it because someone else introduced it to me. And not that, there's a lot of the books on my shelf were introduced to me via BookTube or, let's face it, mostly BookTube. And it doesn't take away anything from them necessarily, but there is a sense of discovering, an excitement of discovering a book on your own and because you chose on your own. Like, no one else taught you, never heard about it, and you just chose it on your own. Now the thing is, there were aspects of it that, like, I'm still trying to process and figure out. And I do want to reread this one again. See, that's a good way to put it, that some of my favorites I don't necessarily want to reread again, but it doesn't mean that they're not a favorite. It just means I don't need to reread it again. And that's like Valley of the Dolls is one of those. But this one, I want to reread it. So this was such an interesting world. I think it would be considered a dystopian world where machines it's an alternate history where we had World War III, and we had to use machines, and we become so reliant on machines that it's like all of a sudden we become dependent on them, and we become lazy, and just there's not a lot. And our main character, Paul Proteus, is very frustrated now. He's starting to see the cracks in their government system, and is kind of starting to not like his job and not be happy with his life. And he has a friend who introduces him to, there's a group of people that are anti-machine and fighting against this new establishment and want to go back to the way things are. He kind of makes me think of the main character Winston in 1984 a little bit, but he feels a little more complex and intriguing for me than Winston. I see, he's a cross between Winston and, if you ever seen in Truman Burbank from The Truman Show, that's what he feels like. I was just watching a video where they discussing The Truman Show, so that's why I'm thinking about that movie right now. Great movie, by the way, and kind of relevant to today. to some of the things going the way things are today. And so he reminds me of those two characters a little bit. Cross between those two characters. And it's just interesting to see. And I also feel like he's being pulled in all these different directions by all these different people. And he's struggling with deciding for himself what he really wants. Like, no one will let him have what he wants. Like, everyone's trying to run his life for him and tell him how to think and feel. And, and so finally, by the end, he kind of snaps. And I think in a way, this book is relevant to today. I mean, there's different kinds of machines, and now what's running things for us is social media. In the end, and how we think and feel, how social media is guiding that. So in this one, it's just machines are running things. Kurt Vonnegut could have no way of thinking about social media. Like, The Circle is more like relevant to the social media aspect, but that's because that was written more recently, so it can reflect on today. And it's a lot. David Eggers can think about, okay, what will happen next, and can predict social media, because social media was going on when he was writing. Well, this one, Kurt Vonnegut and like all those other authors like George Orwell and Ray Bradbury and Aldous Huxley, they could not know or even come with the concept of social media, I don't think. So their dystopians aren't entirely accurate, but they're close. Like, especially Fahrenheit 451 and Brave New World. And this one in 1984 is a little closer. Is a little close too, but like, if I had to put an order, which like 1984. I mean, I don't know. I would have to think about that. But anyway, but yeah, this is really good. And like I said, Mike. I'm trying to think of the channel person name. I can't think of his name right now. He's a subscriber of mine. He's got me. He was the one who brought to my attention the title and asked me if I think it really is relevant. And yeah, I mean, and I did answer his question in the comments. But yeah, so after he brought the attention to the title, I looked it up, and it does fit, because it's basically a piano that plays itself, and you can set it so it will keep going the whole time. So, and in a way, these machines are like that. Like, they operate on their own. You just have to push a button and turn them on. And I think someone else pointed out that the main character was operated one that used to play. I don't know, but it's also interesting that the priest that they meet, the former, I think he's a priest, that they meet, that they cross paths with later, it's interesting that he leads, because he is someone that did go to college, but he's living in the lower part of the community, the lesser intelligent part of the community where those people live. But he's probably the smartest person there in that community, because he is college educated. So I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, there's a lot to explore in this book, a lot to think about, a lot to discuss. And I think there are a lot of people, and I definitely think, it's his first book, and I don't know if it might have flaws and stuff. Because this is only the first book I've ever read by Kurt Vonnegut. I haven't even read, Slaughterhouse 5 yet. And I will be reading Galapagos either in July or August. We will see. But yeah, I think it's great. Definitely think worth checking out. I think people should check this one out. Okay, and then we have after that one, we have, okay, so now we're on to March, I think, where I finally read my first book in my Tolkien project. Okay, and that is the biography of Tolkien by Humphrey Carpenter, the same guy who edited his Tolkien's letters, and put them in a book. So this was really good. I mean, there isn't a lot, but Tolkien did not like the idea of biography anyway. But this feels like a very cozy biography. And I mean, there is, like, I think Carpenter does kind of speculate a little bit and form opinions on Tolkien in this biography. Like, he tries not to, but I think he does a little bit. It was like when we got him trying to speculate what Tolkien's daily life would have been like. I enjoyed reading that chapter where because, with the little details that you can get Tolkien, the impression of Tolkien, it was kind of a really good, he's one of those authors that actually feels relatable. Probably not every author does, but he felt very relatable, very much a nerd, and and a little bit of snob. Like, I thought it was kind of amusing how, he had, especially when you got glimpses of him and C.S. Lewis offering criticisms and critiquing work, and also it's kind of endearing that he just did not get the fame, the celebrity. Like, it really kind of weird. I think it kind of baffled him, and people became obsessed with him as a person because they loved his work. But yeah, so a lot of biographies start from their birth to all the way to their death. Like, that's how this book started. Like, we cover his life, which, like I said, there isn't a lot of information, but it seems like he lived a very simple life, and he was not a controversial person. The only thing is like, he kind of pressured his wife had to convert to Catholicism, and she kind of began to resent that a little bit, and he was working a lot as a teacher, so he didn't spend as much time as he wanted to. But despite that, he was a good dad. Like, he made up for his limited time with his kids, it sounds like, and his kids were his sounding board for his characters and his books. I mean, there's a reason why Christopher Tolkien is the person that you would go to that had edited his books, the ones that remained unfinished, all the works he didn't get to finish. And as much as I loved the Hobbit movies, yes, I was one of those people who actually enjoyed them, I can't blame Christopher being a little pissed and not really liking them. And from what I've heard, I don't think he really loved the original trilogy either. Like, the original movie trilogy. But yeah, it was so much fun to read about Tolkien and get to know him as a person and see a little bit of his life, and his devoutness to his religion was really sweet and a really positive aspect of his identity, and just the fact that it was so endearing that he was also a perfectionist. That's why there's a lot of work that's unfinished, because he wanted it perfect, and he would continuously rewrite things. I mean, it's amazing that we eventually got The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings that got published and that came out into the world, because he was such a perfectionist about it. Like, wanted to make it, such a way to, I feel like that's such a creative person to be like, for someone who's a creative person to really want it to be perfect and obsessively want your work to be perfect. But yeah, this was such a you know, if you really want to get to know Tolkien, I think this is a good place to start. Um, I do need to pick up the letters at some point. The problem is, again, you guys, again, my secret is that I have never finished, never read the Lord of the Rings book. Like, I have attempted to start the Fellowship, but I have never read the whole way. I've only watched the movies, so I keep thinking, okay, before I read anything, I need to finally read Lord of the Rings, but it's so long, and they're not individual books. I have it in the one big book, which is how Tolkien originally wanted it. He wanted it published in one big novel. But yeah, this was such a great read, a great biography. I really enjoyed it. It's not a super long biography, but still definitely, but a really good one. Okay, so then I finally read the first book, The Natural History of Dragons, the Lady Trent, the memoir of Lady Trent by Marie Brennan. This was such a cool idea that she came up with. The idea of, well, first of all, I love the concept of dragons. What if dragons were real and you could study them scientifically? Because they're like giant lizards. So I thought the concept is really fun to explore, and I also love that this is written like a memoir. Like this woman, Isabel, is a real person, and this is her memoir. Like, it's like, this is not the first. This is only the first part. She's covering her whole life, and the way it's written, like like as if it takes place in the Regency or Victorian period, and it also feels so cozy. Like, and the fact that it's dragons really makes the science stuff easier to get into, because the science aspect, I'm not a big science fiction reader, and sometimes my mind gets bogged down with all the science, the numbers, and all the information you're given. You have to pay to know, and all the numbers and the definitions of things, and it can be overwhelming for me and very confusing and tedious. But because we're dealing with dragons here, that really helped. It made it more fun. And the book also includes, let me see if I can find a sketch. It's really cool because she sketches the dragons she sees, she encounters. So I thought that was really cool and fun to get, and we actually got the sketches. Like, I don't mind artwork in books. I just don't like it's just hard for me to get into comic books. Because that's mostly pictures, and then maybe like there's a talk bubble or description of the scene, and I just can't get into that. But anyway, and just like, and it is a story of her looking back, and she kind of just explains that I was young, naive, and I was desperate, and because she does make impulsive, selfish decisions at times, and has to learn from her mistakes throughout the book, and that's something we do. So as the series progresses, I'm sure she will learn and grow as a character, and learn from her mistakes, and not always be as selfish and self-centered just to get to her goal, which is to study dragons. Also, it's really cool, this world of the Vystrani. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And this culture, and in the mountains, this village and everything, and that the dragons there are sick and they're eating people, so there's real danger, and there's a whole culture that she has to adapt to. And I would love to see this as a movie or a TV show. Actually, a TV show would be better because there's so many books, like a handful of books, like four or five books, I think. And if they made into a TV series or a limited series, I think that would be really cool to see this. But like I said, I'd be very nervous because I would worry they would ruin it, that Hollywood would get in the way. I wonder, like, maybe Max might be good, Netflix I would be wary of. Amazon Prime, I don't know. I feel like it sounds like they're not really good with their adaptations, and they don't respect the fans and don't, stay true to the material. They just go off and do their own thing, and they just know that it will make money if it's popular. Um, and also, you gotta love Jacob. He's such a great guy. He was, for her, he was such a great guy, and she was lucky to find a good, appreciative husband. I wonder if she's gonna be lucky other times. And I mean, great. I don't know if she'll find a husband in every book, which that would be excessive. Hopefully, she won't have a husband in every book. Yeah, that's a little spoiler. Something happens to Jacob. But yeah, it was so much fun, this story and this world, and I'm looking forward to reading Tropic Serpents. I think that's book 2. And this was so much fun, I mean, it was really cool, and it also had a little bit of a cozy feel to it. But so there's that. Okay, and then I read, so after that we have okay, so I read book 2 and 3 of the Rosales series. And I liked book 2, but I think book 3 was my favorite. And book 2 and 3 are in this collection. So, because, like, book 2, you're dealing with the son of the guy who manages the guy who owns this land. He manages, and that was an interesting predicament for this kid. While, I mean, both main characters in both books 2 and 3 were kind of caught between two worlds. But I don't know. I can't really explain why I decided that I preferred book 2 as my favorite, or book 3 was my favorite. But yeah, this one you're dealing with an adult character who's, he was born poor, but then Don Vansay, this rich dude, is like, "You're my son. I'm claiming you now that you're old enough." And you have this kid, like, he kind of lives this cushy life, but then he's also still feels guilty and feels like he's abandoning his half brother, who is now leading, a rebellion. And what do they call him? He's I guess so. He's the activist. He's really, his brother's causing trouble, and our main character is put in this position of who he's loyal to. He has to decide where his loyalties lie. And it's like, you have to pick a side. He is forced to pick a side. So I like that it explores that idea of someone kind of caught between two different lives and having to decide, what he's willing to sacrifice, and trying to decide what he thinks is right. And, he's trying to play both sides, but he can't. Like, the society won't let him. And just, his messy relationships with his family and his father and mother and brother, and it's just such a, like, it's a very heartbreaking story. I mean, both of them are good. I just, for some reason, there's something a little more intriguing about book 3, My Brother, My Executioner. I guess it kind of the relationship between the two brothers kind of helps and makes it more intriguing. I think that might be what makes it intriguing, the relationship between the two brothers. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the series so far, which is weird to say because it's not a happy series. I mean, the first book was, the first book, Dusk, was, there was hope in that one. While books 2 and 3, there wasn't as much hope for the characters. But yeah, it's another book in my Philippine literature project, this whole series. And again, all the Philippine literature I recommend, because I'm determined to get the world to read more Philippine literature. Okay, so I'm being called away, and I will finish showing you the rest of the books that are my favorites this first half of the year. I hope you enjoyed what I've showed you so far and are interested in all these books that I've told you about so far. I hope you give them a shot, and I will talk to y'all later. To be continued. Bye.